Alrighty guys, so now we have the overhead carry. This is one of our more complex carries. And what we're looking at now, as opposed to our standard farmer's carry, which is down by the side, is we're now really starting to test shoulder stability. Of course, hopefully shoulder mobility is there, but the big one here is shoulder stability. So we're not necessarily trying to achieve what we usually would with our carry work, so be it our offset carries or our farmer's carry, suitcase carry, whatever that might be. What we're trying to achieve here is shoulder stability. So first things first, it's probably not going to be as heavy as your normal carries because you're pressing up overhead. However, a few things still remain key that we need to focus on. And again, let's start from the ground, work our way up. As we're walking, we are striking with that heel, and then when we push through, we're pushing through those toes. The whole time the glutes are staying locked on. That is key. And you're going to notice this even more through our overhead carry is we need to make sure we are staying in that posterior tilt. So we're keeping those hips tilted posteriorly. We're locked on through the abs. We're squeezing the glutes. What you will almost see when someone starts to lose it through the core is when they're in that press position, those hips go into that anterior tilt, we suddenly start placing a ton of load through the lower back. So lumbar, bottom of thoracic is taking a lot of load. The erectors are starting to overwork because they're trying to keep you upright, and the core has completely failed, or all through the rec abdom and TA, that's started to fail. So we need to make sure that we're staying locked on through the abs and we're staying in that posterior tilt, okay? We're not letting ourselves go anterior. So that's probably the biggest thing. From there is making sure that we are keeping in that upright position. So if I face this way, we want to make sure as we press up, we're going straight towards the roof. We're not pressing in that almost military press position, so that big angle that you can see there. We want to make sure we're going straight up. The other thing you'll start to see as well, potentially, is they might start to get a bit of bend in the arms. We want to make sure that stays locked, but in that nice anatomically correct position. So with the kettlebells, we don't want to be coming in too tight, or with anything that we're pressing. We want to make sure we're staying where that shoulder fits into its girdle, into its ball and socket joint real nicely. So we're in that nice anatomical correct position. Now, of course, this will slightly change between individuals depending on how the head of the humerus sits in there, the bone of the bicep and tricep, depending on how that sits in that shoulder joint will depend on where we come there. So there is no textbook, it's wherever feels most comfortable. But as I said, a few things still remain. So when we go overhead, we want to make sure that we're not coming into that elevation of the shoulder. We want to stay lats on, we're pulling down, and we're keeping that shoulder depressed. It's locked in place. Like I said, this is a shoulder stability exercise. So if you yourself start to notice that things are getting a bit sloppy and you can't pull it back into line, it's probably time to stop, call that set there, rest, then have another crack, or even potentially start to lower that weight if you're trying to exceed a bit too quickly. So very quickly, make sure we work from the bottom up. So heel strike, toe push, squeezing glutes, staying in the posterior tilt, abs are locked, making sure when we press, shoulders are depressed, they're down in the socket, lats are on tight. We're not overarching through the thoracic. That will also depend on mobility. And as we press with the shoulder, we're going straight up. We're not letting it come forward, and we're staying locked on. Now it's time to do the exercise. So as we go to press up, what I just did is I dropped the elbows, big no-no. Make sure we keep those elbows out so we're in that safe position. From here, we're pressing up overhead. And again, as we walk, we're staying nice and tight, making sure everything's locked on. If you start to speed it up, those arms might move around as long as you're able to keep shoulders depressed, everything locked on, and we're not placing that excessive arch in the back where everything starts to load up through lumbar. Now, of course, probably the beauty with this exercise is if you are using a decent weight for your own self, so something that is challenging, you'll probably find that you start to notice things when certain parts of the body start to fail functionally. So if you do start to overextend through the back, then you're probably going to feel that straight away down through lumbar, through QLs, bottom of erectors, whatever it might be. So the big thing there, guys, because again, this is a complex movement, and I'm sorry to waffle, make sure everything's staying together, make sure we're locked on, and then if you do start to notice failure in some area, call it there, rest, come back, try again, or scale weight down. Whatever it works, but it is a complex movement, a few things can go wrong. The key thing is making sure we stay locked on and tight through those hips, through the thoracic and trunk. That's probably the biggest part, guys, and then making sure, of course, we've got our shoulder mobility all sorted before we even get there. But that is our overhead carry with the kettlebells.